You're listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast, brought to you by DraftKings, America's #1 sportsbook app, code word PHNX. Now joined by Matt Muehlebach, a.k.a. Purvis Short. Hello, Matt.
How you doing, Mike? What's happening?
Not too bad, dude. Not too bad. First of all, how good does it feel to have basketball back?
Oh, how nice was it to have basketball in September?
Oh,
Red-blue game at the end of September. I mean, we didn't even start practice, man, until October 15th when I was playing. Think about that.
I remember the same thing. Like the red-blue game used to be like where you could see guys for the first time. And I remember back in the day, October 15th was when you could see Mike Bibby play, or when you could see somebody for the first time. Now it's in September. I dig it.
Yeah. No, it's great. It probably takes away from the quality of the game just a little bit because they haven't really gotten going. But it's fun to get it going, to get hoops going again.
All right, so let's talk about this team. And let's see, is that on my end? Hold on, there's a weird sound. Just a second. Let's see if all right, let's try that now. Okay. So what's weird about this team, and what is it? Can you hear that on your end?
No, it's
maybe it's just me. Okay, cool.
Okay.
All right, cool. I can deal with that. One thing that I look at with this squad though, Matt, is I'm looking at internal improvement here. And because you've got some new guys that are coming in, obviously, but let's talk about I don't know what that is. Let's talk about what's going on though with this team, and Oumar Ballo. I want to start with because he looked like an absolute monster out there.
Yeah, he did, man. How about the footwork? How good a shape he's in. That was what blew me away. I think thinking about him last year. I mean, he was the ultimate project. I didn't even really have him in my top 10 for the Arizona team last year when they started the season. And because, they came over from Gonzaga, had no real stats, and, it was a total project. And I mean, lo and behold, I thought he was a sixth man of the year last year in the Pac-12. And I thought he looked good the other night, man. He looked really good physically and had that little spin move in the lane. And
the left-handed hook off the glass.
Yeah, right. I mean, he has skill. And how about that little runner he has like at the free throw line? He pulled that out against Washington State last year. And he's got some cool moves, and obviously he's a monster inside. I mean,
I came away thinking too with this team that with Oumar Ballo, I think he's going to be the starter. I think it's hard to say that he won't be just because he's physically so far ahead than other guys. But you look at it though, Henry Visar, Azuolas Tubelis, these are going to be guys that are going to be able to give you some real problems out there too. They're going to be able to beat some teams up for sure.
Yeah, in fact, we talked about it last year a lot, Mike. I thought what was cool was because they had Koloko and Tubelis, the 1-2 punch. But, then you would bring in Ballo. And it's almost like a great NFL team, right, that brings in that second running back to just sort of pound people. And, you get beat up on the first guy or the first couple guys in Arizona's case, and then you bring in a third who's just as big. Actually, Ballo was bigger than all of them. And so I think they could have the same thing this year because you could have, Ballo and Tubelis beating up on people for the first 10 minutes. And then you bring in the, Henry Visar kid, the freshman. We saw, the skill that he had and already seemed very comfortable in that game. That's the thing that stood out to me.
Right. Now, looking around the rest of the conference, I think what's exciting about Arizona is that you've got Azuolas Tubelis, we're going to get to in just a second, but him, Umar Ballo, and Henry Visar, I think those are the guys that you are really going to be the ones that kind of give you that margin for error. Because when you got teams like UCLA that already have Jaime Jaquez, that already have Tiger Campbell, guys like that, the one thing they don't really have up front is a plethora of big men. And that's where I think Arizona's got to make their mark, and it starts with Azuolas Tubelis. Let me ask you this. What are your expectations for Azuolas this year, Matt?
I think the big expectation for me is just consistency, right? To sort of take over the team. We saw, I thought in the middle of February, Mike, I thought he was in the running for Pac-12 Player of the Year. I mean, legitimately, the way he was scoring, the way he was dominating games, I thought he was a difference maker. He was that one guy nobody could handle on the other team. And, they started playing him differently. They started really laying off him. They were giving him that free throw. They were giving him anything outside of the free throw line. And then they took away the left hand. And so, he had an adjustment. It's like a pitcher, knowing that a guy hits a lot of fastballs and they started throwing him the junk. And they changed defenses on him. So I think he's going to have to figure a way to keep him honest. Look, if he gets the ball in the low post, he's as good as anyone. If he gets the ball in the break, he's as good as anyone. It's in that half court away from the bucket. What's he going to do, right? How is he going to and play? And then I think the big thing to me is just consistency, because we saw it at times, and then he didn't have a great end to the season. We know that. And I think sometimes he maybe relied on guys like Mathurin and Dalen and Koloko. And I think now he's got to kind of take a leadership role.
Okay, so I've thought, though, that he needs to be the guy. He needs to be the best player on this team, because I believe that he has the highest upside. We've loved Ballo. We're going to get to Kerr Kriisa. We're going to get to Pelle Larsson, all of those guys. But Azuolas is the one player that I think needs to be 18 and 10 pretty much every single game out there, or at least be that averages, because he's blessed with, he's got good physical abilities. He's got good hands. He's got natural skills. And I think it's up to him. He's got to be the best guy out there.
Yeah, it's to him. For him, I think it's a mindset, is what you just said. Right. He's got to decide, I'm the best player on this team. And I've got to show that every game. I've got to be as you said, an 18 and 10. I just talked about his scoring. I want to see his rebounding too, because he should easily be 8, 9, or 10 this year with his physical abilities. As strong as he is, as big as he is. And if he does that, what that shows me is his mindset's there for every game. Every play. He's not taking plays off. He's not taking games off. He's there the whole way through.
Yeah. Okay. So when I watch this squad, though, Pelle Larsson's the other guy too, because a lot of people are talking about, Ben Mathurin, Dalen Terry. Who are you going to get? Who's that next guy going to be? And Tommy Lloyd, I mean, you've talked with him off record before. I've been fortunate enough to talk with him once off record without saying anything. You can tell that he has a lot of faith, a lot of confidence in what Pelle Larsson can do, and he expects big things.
Yeah, no question. I think Pelle, obviously coming over, he was the sixth man of the year, right? In the Pac-12 last year. And so coming over from Utah, had a super solid year last year. I mean, he was terrific off the bench on a very talented team. But, and I say that, but in a good way, he's now got to be a starter. And I said this about Ballo the other night doing the red-blue game. When you're a sixth man or a seventh man, you can come in, let the game come to you. If everything comes right, you have a good game. And if it doesn't, no one's going to say anything, right? You play good D, do the right thing, not make any mistakes. But I think he's got to have a different mindset this year, kind of like we just talked about with Tubelis. He's a starter. I mean, he's a guy that should be an all Pac-12 player. I really liked him because he looked really bouncy in the first practice that I saw.
Didn't he look a little more just fluid, a little bit more naturally athletic?
Yeah, because he can. It's funny you say that, because he can look a little stiff at times, right?
For sure.
And he did look a lot more fluid when I saw him. His body looked really good, and I think a lot of that is playing, against the when they had the European championships they had this summer that he played. He played some pros. He played Luka, right? Didn't he? I think he went.
He played Luka
against Luka. You're the guy that told me about Luka, how good he was. I don't probably watch as much NBA as you, and I didn't. When you said it, I was like,
well, let's be honest, Matt. You've got 5 full-time jobs. You've got a family. You've got daughters playing volleyball. I mean, you get an excuse for not being the nerd that I am watching late-night NBA hoops.
Well, Pella went up against Luka. Let's put it that way. He didn't stop him. No, by the way, nobody stops Luka. Don't do that. No one stops that guy. But Pella played against him, and I think Pella's confidence seems at a different level. Look, I believe he's a pro. I think
you believe he's an NBA player?
I do. I believe because of his size, that's the distinction he has against a lot of players. He has size. He's a legit 6'6", super bouncy.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of reminds me of a guy I played with, Judd Bushler.
So Matt Muehlebach right now calling for a 13-year career, 3 NBA titles out of Pelle Larsson as we speak.
That's right. No expectations.
No expectations there, Pella. Speaking of expectations, because I want to get to expectations on this team, but first got to pay the bills. The DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX, back the A. By the way, the movement is taking off, as we all know. It's on the cat trans going around the U of A as we speak. I was very giddy, and I sent Matt Muehlebach that picture.
Mike. You're getting it going.
I don't know. But for the DraftKings Sportsbook app, new customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. If that's not enough, everyone can boost their winnings with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. Right now, for every leg you add, you can boost your winnings up to 100% with payouts bigger than ever. Why bet on football anywhere else? It's simple. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. That's code word PHNX at the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. We show for details. And as always, the official brew of PHNX, Four Peaks Brewery. We have away game watch parties. Uncle Kev is going to be here for October 15th.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's going to be up there downtown. Four Peaks will be there. So.
Okay. What is it? What date is that?
October 15th. If Matt Muehlebach, Uncle Kev thinks very highly of Matt Muehlebach.
I love Uncle Kev, man. Uncle Kev's my guy. Glenn Parker's buddy. I first met him through Glenn Parker, and you guys did an amazing job on that radio show. It was fun.
It was a lot of fun for sure. It was a great time for sure. All right, so let's talk about some of the wild cards on this team. I want to talk to you about Kerr Kriisa. You played with a guy named Kerr that could shoot a little bit. I think you're still staying in contact with him from time to time. My question is this. What should we expect from Kerr from a three-point perspective? Because when I watch it from an outsider, the shot looks pure. He shoots it with confidence. It just doesn't go in at the rate that, at least last year, that I think that you would think. What do you want to see percentage-wise from Kerr Kriisa this year, Matt?
I think he's good enough to be around a, 39, 40 and above percent three-point shooter. And he didn't show it the other night, didn't make his shots. But, I think part of it too, look, I don't read much into the red-blue. I just don't.
For sure. Otherwise, Bo Muehlebach would be the better Muehlebach.
Well, I'll tell you a guy.
Not spelled the same, though.
I think I told Brian Jeffries that we were sitting there the first year. I think it was Sean Miller's first year, and Momo Jones was playing. Mm-hmm. And look, Momo was a really good college player.
He was a good college player.
He was a really good player. He got the team to the Elite Eight. He had a really good career. He went to where was it?
Iona.
Iona, yes. Mm-hmm. He went to Iona, played really well there. I thought he was going to be the greatest player that ever lived after the Red Flu.
Right, for sure.
He looked incredible. But you just, especially when guys have even bad games, I don't think you read into it. Kerr didn't have a good game, shooting-wise at least.
I like to look more at just how guys move, what their fluidity looks like, their confidence level, stuff like that.
Yeah, how they play. But I expect him to be around 40%. Mike, I'll tell you what's interesting with him is he going to get more twos this year?
Mm-hmm.
He was around 83% three-point shots only last year.
Right.
And I think a guard today, you got to get more twos. I know he's worked on runners. I know he can get to the rim. And I think he's going to have to get to the rim. He's going to have to finish some twos inside, obviously get to the free throw line as a point guard at times. So I don't know. I expect him to have a really good year this year. Courtney Ramey said something to me the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him why he chose Arizona, and he said it was Tommy Lloyd's belief in him, the confidence he had in him. And I'll tell you what, Lloyd has a lot of belief in Kerr, and they're both really confident guys. And so with that confident, I expect him to be around 40.
And one thing, too, that I think people need to understand about Tommy Lloyd is that Tommy Lloyd, while he does come off as kind of the happy-go-lucky, aw shucks guy, he knows what he's talking about, and he's no BS at the end of the day. I'll never forget that first press conference he had last year, where the first thing he said was, I've been around good teams. I know what good teams look like. This is a good team. Keep in mind, Matt, there were no preseason top 25 expectations. And then when he went a step further and said, I expect Christian Koloko to be in the running for the Defensive Player of the Year in the conference, that was really kind of because, you got to remember at that time, Koloko was a guy that's playing 14, 15 minutes a game. Hands were questionable. And everything Tommy Lloyd said came true.
Totally. He's a really bright basketball guy. Mm-hmm. I was at a Warriors game actually when U of A was in the Bay Area, and I was doing the studio for the weekend. Mm-hmm. I ended up at the Warriors game. The U of A team was there, and after the game, we were up in the office with Steve Kerr and the Warriors brass and their coaching staff.
Must be nice. Remember the little people, Matt.
It was cool. It was fun, and Tommy's so laid back, and like you alluded to it. That's why I wanted to bring this up. He kind of comes off sometimes as an oh shucks guy, right? Mm-hmm. But it was like him and Steve started talking about hoops, like X's and O's, and it was like blah 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 blah. They were going a mile a minute, and not trying to outdo each other, but it was cool to hear, like two really elite, and what's elite strategists, elite X's and O's guys. Despite the fact that I think the skill that both of them have the best is the way they just communicate with people and the way they treat people and the way they bring joy and energy to the game and get guys to play better. But their X's and O's was really fun to hear.
I always think about that with Steve Kerr because, first of all, and you and I have talked about this before, the one thing that I'm glad that Steve Kerr is now, I'm glad that people now understand the greatness of him as a coach. Yeah. This fourth title, and it's absurd that this fourth title, I think, proved to people. But the thing about Steve Kerr, and I was reading an article in Sports Illustrated about him this probably about 6-7 years ago when he took over the Warriors. And the first thing that everybody said was he understood what he needed to do with the team. He also understood how everybody worked. Not everybody is a one-size-fit-all person. You can't treat Draymond Green the same way you're going to treat Steph Curry. And that's just the way that it is with basketball. I always use the comparison to Bill Parcells. He was asked, how come you never yell at Lawrence Taylor, but you yell at Phil Simms? And he says, because Lawrence Taylor doesn't need to be yelled at, Phil Simms does. But, but I think Tommy Lloyd and Steve Kerr get that to a T, like you were just talking about, how everybody's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's a new style of coaching, honestly. And when I was playing in the 80s, I don't know if there was almost anyone around that did that. I mean, it's just, and if they did, they didn't talk about it, but it was a lot more, there were certainly strategists. You had guys like Lute Olson that was the most amazing strategist and game planner and all those things. But it was almost like in that era, if you weren't winning or doing well, the answer was just play harder, play tougher, play with more I mean, that was it. And I think Kerr and Lloyd are kind of that new era of coach that really recognizes you got to treat players differently. I play with a guy, Sean Rooks, has since passed, and he was not good when you challenged him. Like he was a really sensitive guy. He was smart as can be, had one of the highest IQs on the team, and he was really good with just sort of like just positive reinforcement. And then he would go kill anybody for you, But it was funny. Like I was kind of the opposite. I actually was great. Our boy Kevin O'Neill,
KO baby.
KO used to, he used to challenge me every minute, not every day, every minute, and it was good for me. I actually responded to it. And there's guys like TJ McConnell was like that, and Nick Johnson was like that. Not everybody is.
What was Sean Elliott like in that regard? Was it just that he was just so much better than everybody else, or what was that like?
He actually was. He kind of needed to be kicked a little bit in the butt, and Lute would do that. And it was funny. The story I always tell is Lute would like a couple weeks before practice, or before our first game, or a week before, he'd say, "Hey, who's ever leading the team in rebounds is going to start in the first game." We kept all those stats, and and he would like turn to KO and go, "Is Lute really serious? Like, is he really going to do that? And KO's like, hell no, he's not going to do that. You're
Right.
going to start. But Lute would challenge Sean a little bit. And when Sean got mad, man, he was already, I mean, as you know, he's like
Right.
my favorite player of all time.
Right.
But when he got mad, man, he was really good. But he didn't really need it that often. He was just so talented that you just kind of left him alone for the most part.
Would you say, moving back to this year's team, that I would be pretty surprised if the starting five for at least, I think for the whole season will probably be Kerr Kriisa, Courtney Ramey, Pelle Larsson, Azuolas Tubelis, and Umar Ballo?
I think so. Yeah. I would be surprised if it wasn't, right?
Right.
I think those five are really solid. They're really good. And I feel like those other guys will be great off the bench. Guys like Cedric Henderson, I think Vasar we talked about already. I think he'll be really good off the bench. No, that seems to me like that's one advantage they have. I mean, yeah, they lost a lot, but they have a really good core coming back.
And one thing about Tommy Lloyd, too, is I think people need to trust his evaluations overseas. We're going to get to that in just a second. But again, a couple of new sponsors here. Tap and Bottle, obviously. All the away games were there. Had a great showing last week. We'll be there October 15th. Downtown, Scott and Rebecca, come hang out with us. You can make fun of me. You can hang out with me. Just come on down there and hang out. And Mountain Mike's Pizza is now online as well right here. They're going to be up on Oracle. Stop by there before you come to a Tap and Bottle. But we'll be talking more about them as well. Sponsors coming in left and right here, Matt. But now, Philip Borovichinen. When he first was announced that it was going to be a player, I'll admit I was skeptical because I'm reading he plays in one of the lower leagues there, and I'm looking and it kind of looks like that Zapruder film footage, some of it where it's like it's like crackly and it's black and white and you're shooting over a broomstick.
Right.
But Matt, and you would know this a lot better than me, just watching him from a distance, he looks a lot more physically put together than I expected him to be. He looks physically like he could play.
Well, two things. One, physically, but also his height. Like they say he's 6'9". I didn't know that coming in, or I wasn't sure, but they said he's 6'9", like a legit. And it's funny you mentioned his team because he was like the star of his team.
Right.
Whereas like some of those other guys coming, like Vasar played at an unbelievable program. He played at I think it was Real Madrid, right? In Spain. And Philip was the star of his team. He was everything. Like he was the Magic Johnson of his team, and he plays with some flash. Like if you watch him, like he likes to make some flashy plays. He's got a little bit of Kerr Kriisa in that respect. But you're right. He's a hard worker. They really like him a lot. It's funny you asked about Tommy because I asked Tommy a couple months ago. I said, you're renowned for recruiting people overseas. And I said, that's got to be hard to see how players translate because we've seen it, last 20 years, the influx of European players. For sure. How do you know? How do you know Markkanen's going to be really good, but some other guy's not?
Right.
And I asked him, like, do you know now? And he goes, oh, yeah. He's like, it was super cool to hear the confidence. Like, he's like, I know now. Like at the beginning, I think it was hard for him or anyone. But I think he's as good as anyone in the business at figuring out how that translates to this college game.
Well, it's funny, and I don't think that I'm saying anything out of turn here, but I remember a lot of people were down on Dylan Anderson as his career went on in high school because he started out as a top 5, top 10 player in the class, and he just kind of slid down the rankings. And Lloyd said, trust me, once we get him in here, get him in the weight program, get him around where he's going to be just fine. And watching him out there, again, I don't expect him to be really a contributor this year, but you can tell a year or two down the road, Dylan Anderson's going to be a contributor.
I totally agree. Yeah, totally agree. I really like his game.
I do too.
And you're right. He's a big guy that you can tell is going to take a minute just to kind of evolve into what he's going to be. But you can see things working as he plays. Like he knows where to be, knows how to do things. He's better than I thought. I was with you because I'd kind of heard some stuff.
Right.
But I liked him a lot. Saw him in practice last week and then obviously in the Red Blue. I like his game. I think he's going to be a good player in a couple of years.
I've always felt with big men that you can tell early on, not whether they're going to be good, but whether there's something to work with here. And this is no slight because he's made money playing overseas and he's fighting for his country. But I could tell very early on that Kirill was probably not going to have a lot to work with there. It just didn't, a big body, seemed like a great guy. But, Dylan Anderson, you could tell there's something to work with there. It looks like basketball just comes naturally to him. And I think that's something that's kind of unique to big men in that regard.
It really is, yeah. And it's why big men, especially in the 80s, 90s, redshirted all the time.
Right.
I mean, think about my Final Four team in 88. I just mentioned him a minute ago. Sean Rooks was a redshirt. And he played 12 years in the league or 13 or whatever. And he was a guy I could tell right away, too, like physically and just like the game was way too fast for him the first year.
Right.
But you could see the skill and his hands. We always used to kind of make fun of him. We call him the Wookiee hands, but he had such good hands and the way he held the ball and stuff. His touch was unbelievable. And you knew the body just had to catch up. And I can see that with Dylan a lot, it's just, they're so big and it's just, those guards have such an advantage because they sort of mature quicker.
What do you expect out of Kylan Boswell this year? Obviously, he's coming off the foot. He's younger. My opinion is anything they get from him is gravy because I've always felt with the reclassifying next year to me, and we're going to get to what this year and next year's expectations in a minute. But I've felt that Eric, you get him in here this year, you get him rehabilitated, get him acclimated to the college game because next year I think is really the arrival date for when he's going to really be needed there at that lead guard position.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm with you. Although I two things. I saw him in practice the other day. He's really put together.
He is.
I mean, it's crazy because he reclassified. So I'm like, well, he's already a year younger than everybody. Right. And I mean, he almost is like a bigger, stronger Jason Gardner at that age. You remember how like Rip Gardner was?
For sure. Comes in with a bulldog tattoo right there, and he's just ripped. Yeah.
He was ready, man. And I think and he's a dog is what I've heard, like a dog in a good way. Like he's going to go after people on defense and he's going to be physical. And I think in a long season, Pac-12 season and all that, I think he's going to really help him, assuming he's healthy. I think he's only probably, I don't know, maybe a month away or something like that, but I think he's going to really help him.
All right, Daniel Tate, this is a pretty cool story. Matt wrote me a long letter in 1999 telling me how to deal with chronic fatigue syndrome. I will never forget the last thing he recommended was to listen to more Dave Matthews Band. Good advice. That sounds like something. Matt, you are one of the best pushers of the Dave Matthews Band out there.
I'm embarrassed to say I just missed him. He was in Phoenix 2 weeks ago, and I missed him.
Well, weren't you in another continent a couple weeks?
I was in Scotland playing golf in a couple weeks ago, so I just come back from that. Yeah, Dave Matthews is my guy. That's I've been trying to get my daughters to listen to him, and they don't get it. They have no idea.
It's one of those things, though. Maybe by the time they're in their 30s, they're going to say, maybe Dad did know what he was talking about right there.
Well, the crazy thing is I got them going on all these 80s bands and like even 70s. They like Paul Simon and people like that. So they have the music bug, but yeah, for some reason, Dave Matthews is one of those guys, like you hear people all the time say, would he just play his songs like 3 or 4 minutes? I don't need to hear a 12-minute song, but that's the beauty of him.
That's the beauty of Dave Matthews.
That's cool. That guy wrote in. I'm glad to hear it sounds like he's doing pretty good.
That is very cool. What are my expectations for this year's team? And you know this, but I don't. And again, I'd love to be wrong here. I got the A over my left shoulder, so it's backing me right now.
Literally backing you, right?
Yes, it's literally backing me. I feel that it's about a top 15 to 25 team. I think when you lose guys, and again, I'd love to be wrong here, but when you lose a Ben Mathurin, who was one of the handful of best players here the last 15 years on the perimeter. When you lose a Koloko, the ultimate rim protector, Dalen Terry, that jack of all trades, it's unless you're a Duke or a Kentucky or a school where this can just bring in whoever they want, it's hard to replace that. So again, I think you lost a ton. Again, I think they're going to be good. I just don't know that they have enough next level oomph right there, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with you. I think 15 to 25, especially right now, is about the right, kind of spot for them. To me,
By the way, real quick, Atlanta Braves hat from my grandpa, not an Alabama hat.
Oh,
Never.
is that?
Sorry about that, Matt. Go ahead.
I think the ceiling's higher, though. I think it's higher, and it depends on, how. Like, I think it's all those things we just talked about. How good does Kriisa shoot it?
Right.
How good do Ramey and Kriisa play together? Does Pelle Larsson become a, late first round, second round draft pick? Does Tubelis in that same mold become a late first, second round draft pick? And I think those are like four of the storylines that if all those things happen, they could move themselves up higher than the 15 to 25 we're talking about. But look, we saw it in the red blue. And granted, they just started practice 3 days before that. You can't expect really anything, but it was clunky, right? They lost a ton of talent, and it doesn't just replace itself in 5 minutes.
Adama Ball to me is kind of the ultimate wild card here. I watched him a great deal during that. If you were to tell me that he was going to average 4 a game this year, okay. If you were going to tell me that he was going to average 9.5, 10 points a game, and and again, I'm not comparing him to it, but kind of go on that Michael Dickerson projectile where you go to 4 to 10 to 18. I could see that one as well too. I don't really know what to expect from him.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, I saw him in practice the other day, and he at times I didn't really know he was there, and then he makes a move that was maybe the best move of the whole practice.
Right.
And I was sitting next to Jason Gardner, and we look at each other like, damn, that's ridiculous what he just did. He was actually like 2 feet above the rim. It was one of those plays, and he didn't dunk it. Like, he could have easily dunked it.
I've always thought that's the most graceful way to dunk, too, where you just throw it down without touching it.
He laid it in. He just kind of like finger rolled it, and by the time he was down, it was a foot above the rim. And at first I was like, dude, I'm 6'2". I had a dunk. I think I had 2 dunks in my career. If I could dunk do
you have the footage of that? Because there is footage of it, they believe, of 1 dunk.
I have footage of
that
one.
I've seen.
I do have footage of one. I think I could probably find the second one.
If you could find me the second one, I'd love to see it because I've got one.
We called it a Gumby Dump because it was one of those where you kind of dunk it and then you grab the rim after.
Yes, for sure. Just to accentuate that, in case you didn't know, I did just dunk it right now. But I look around the Pac-12 though, and I think there's 3 teams really that matter. To be honest with you here, I think it's Arizona, UCLA, and Oregon, and they each have interesting questions here. Arizona, you obviously lost a lot of firepower, especially on the perimeter. UCLA, you return Tiger Campbell, you return Hawkes, you bring in a couple 5-star guys, but you essentially have one player that's over 6'7", which I think plays well for Arizona. Oregon on paper is going to be huge. You're bringing in a top 5 player, but as we saw last year, maybe those pieces just don't fit together because Oregon, every time you thought that Oregon was about to go on a run, they beat UCLA or something, they then get drubbed by Stanford or ASU. So all 3 of those teams have real questions, Matt.
Yeah, no, I evaluate them the same as you in terms of the 1, 2, 3. I think Dana Altman's going to be interesting, your guy, because they struggled last year, right?
They did.
Said more than I've ever seen them struggle at Oregon for the expectations. And, I was surprised by it. So it feels like he's going to double down this year and be like, that's not going to happen again. He's too good a coach for that. And I just think, UCLA is going to be interesting again. Without Johnny Juzang, who still had a really good year last year, but didn't have a great year.
Right.
But look, they got Hawkes and Campbell. That 1-2 punch is as good as it's the best 1-2 in the conference,
without question. Too, and Hawkes too. If you were to ask me, who would you put as the preseason Pac-12 Player of the Year? Jaime Hawkes would be that guy for me.
And you might even put Campbell too.
Yes,
I mean Campbell the last 2 years has been sniffing around at that, especially early on in the year. He just runs the team and incredible decision making. He shot the 3 really well last year, so you might even put them 1-2. I'm with you, So who's the surprise of the conference, right?
We'll see. I thought that USC would be that 4th team, but
talent-wise.
What's it? Right. Yeah, because I like Peterson. I like Peterson a great deal. I was never as big a fan as others of Boogie Ellis. I think he's just kind of okay. But their problem is they got. I don't know if you saw this or not, but they got the top 20 big man, the 7-footer, who's out now with a chronic heart condition. And so,
see that, huh?
Yeah, and that's generally what Andy Enfield has been able to do is have these long athletic guys there. I'm not sure what kind of coach he is, but I don't know who that third team is. Stanford returns almost everyone.
That's what I was just going to say with Stanford, because when they got who was the freshman last year?
Kid out of Dallas or a kid out of Texas.
McDonald's All-American. His name just escaped me, but he surprised me in a way coming back.
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was a chance he might even go pro, or who knows, with the transfer portal, you never know with people.
Right.
So getting everybody back, and I know they got a couple good players coming in, they could be a surprise this year. Washington State lost some guys, and I love Kyle Smith.
Right.
So I would have potentially said them. I don't know.
I was surprised by Washington State because I thought Washington State was going to be pretty good. I'm like you. I'm a Kyle Smith fan as well. And they just lost so many players that I don't really know what to expect. I think everybody always asks me, what do you expect from ASU? I think with ASU at this point, you kind of know what you're going to get. You'll probably be about 20-14, probably about 6th in the conference. You might hover around the tournament. I think that's just kind of where ASU's at.
Here's the thing with him is Bobby Hurley. I mean, he coaches with so much energy, and they play so hard. If he gets the right pieces that fit,
what are the right pieces for him?
Well, and that's a question. I think the right pieces for him are, what I've really liked when he's done really well is a 3-guard lineup.
Mm-hmm.
They play fast. They play really hard on defense. He lets them go on offense. But every time they've had that team, they haven't had the, Michael Wright down low or
right. Ike Diagu.
To use
that one, right?
Yeah, Ike Diagu or Mario
Bennett.
Or they just haven't had the one big that could rebound and score.
Heck, even a Jeff Pendergraph type.
Yeah, that's a good name. I like that name. Yeah. I mean, it's finding that it's finding the sort of, I mean, not that you're going to ever find this, but it's like the Draymond or the Dennis Rodman or just the guy that can play the 4 or 5, guard bigs and rebound and run the floor. Bennett Davison, like Arizona's Bennett Davison. That's, if they can find that guy, then Hurley's system and the way he runs it and the way he gives them freedom, he gives those guys a ton of freedom and they love it.
Right, for sure.
But he asked them to play hard on the other end. And so he's gotten good players. It's just those pieces have to mesh.
All right. I want to ask, before we sign off here, I want to get Matt's take on the unis because everybody wants to talk about the unis. But real quick, Game Time is the hottest new ticketing sports thing going online. Here's the deal. You can go on there and get tickets to sports, concert shows. Maybe if you were looking to go to a Dave Matthews Band concert last second and you wanted to say something 60% off, if you're a procrastinator, you would go to Game Time. And so here's the deal. If you love PHNX and you love Game Time, the best way to support us is by buying tickets through the link in the description. Again, if you miss Dave Matthews, don't miss him again. Check it out when he comes back into Phoenix on Game Time. Unis, what do you think, Matt? Because everybody I'm not as big into the uniform phenomenon as everybody else is. I personally love the 90s ones. If they were to ask me anything that Damon Stoudemire ever wore, I'm totally cool with rocking that. But what do you think about it, going back with a little bit more of that 88 look?
Well, let me say I'm with you. I'm not like a uniform guy.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of Oregon's thing.
Right.
And I've always been a shoe guy. Like I was always about shoes, and like when I was growing up, it was cool to get the right shoes. And God, I remember those Converse that Dr. J wore, and then the ones that Magic and Bird wore. That was my original. I got the Converse were my original shoes in 7th grade. I remember my dad. We were a middle class family. We never spent a lot of money on anything, and he bought me a $70 pair of shoes when I think I was in 8th grade. And that was like, he was basically telling me like, dude, you better get a scholarship somewhere if I'm buying you these type of shoes for this kind of money.
When did your dad know that you were really good at basketball and this could maybe take you somewhere? I've never asked you that, but I'm curious about that.
I honestly, I think he thought I was always pretty good. But even like when I was a sophomore or junior, Are
you talking in high school?
In high school, yeah. I was playing at Bishop O'Dowd in Oakland, a major program, starting for them at the point guard position. But I was never a big scorer, so I think people were probably, not sure about me. And I went to 2 camps. I went to the Nike camp back in Princeton, New Jersey. I got invited to that. And he didn't really even know probably what it was. But when I went, like, I knew it was a big deal.
Right.
And the fall, like 2 weeks later, I went to the UC Santa Barbara. It was called the I think it was the All-Star camp or whatever it was the West Coast All-Stars, basically,
Okay.
Santa Barbara. And I remember I called them from that camp. I think there were 250 people in it. And I said, I made the all-tournament team or the all-camp team.
Right.
And he said, God, that's awesome. How many kids are on it? And I said, I think there were 10. And it was, there were 250 people. And I wanted 10. And I think he was like, oh, damn, that's pretty good, right?
For sure.
But he was always, he was always pretty, he was not a parent that would hype me up. He was always more about, like he was a very even keel dad about it. He was great about it, but he was very even keel.
All right. Before we sign off here, Warriors this year. I've been watching a little of their preseason. I know you got a lot of connections on the Warriors. James Wiseman looks really good so far in the preseason. What do you expect? Are you calling a repeat? And do you have maybe a bold prediction about Arizona football as well, if you want to pull it out there?
I do. Well, I'll start there. Actually, with the Warriors, let me start with the Warriors.
Hmm?
I don't have a prediction with him because what they did, and to go back about Kerr, I don't think enough people talked about the job Kerr did.
Right.
And my buddy Bruce Frazier told me, he said, Matt, the way he talks to our team, no one has any idea how good it is. It's like on a brilliant level that no one gets.
Right.
And we talked about this, I think, the last, our last podcast, and it was brilliant what he said. And he's like, people don't talk about the guy, and rightly so. They talk about Steph and all the players, but I don't know what he's going to do because he's such a good communicator, and he'll have a story for him, just like Phil used to have last game and all that stuff.
Right.
He'll have a theme for him probably this year. They'll be incredible because they have Steph. As long as Steph is healthy, right? They'll be in the mix. I have a bold prediction. I think Arizona football they're going to beat the USC Trojans in what, 3 weeks?
3 weeks. Yep.
I think that's homecoming, right?
Right. I believe it is. Yeah. Matt's back in the A in a big way right there.
Yeah. So they have Oregon this week?
Yeah, you got Oregon this week, and then you've got, let me look up here. One thing I do want to say, and you know this too, even though you're a basketball player, or Arizona football generally beats a team that they shouldn't beat along the way. So when people are saying that, they don't have any chance against any of these teams, that I don't really buy that. All right, I'm pulling the schedule up right now. Arizona, Oregon, then Arizona, Washington, then Arizona, USC.
And I think so. The Arizona USC game is after. So Arizona plays Oregon. I
Washington.
think Oregon, and they could upset Oregon this week.
I agree with that.
They absolutely could upset Oregon. I think the Washington game on the road is going to be a tough one.
I agree.
It seems like Arizona always struggles up there on the road, but then they have a week off to prepare for USC and homecoming. And that game, as we know, look, I remember as a basketball player, like every game was the biggest game for Arizona, Arizona opponents. And that's going to be a game that is going to be the biggest game of the year for Arizona. And SC has a week off as well.
Right.
And it won't be as big for them. Let's just face it. They have bigger games. And by the way, the game before that, they play Utah.
Mm-hmm.
So
which they could get beat up in that game because of how Utah
easily
plays.
Get beat up. And you would say that the sort of like narrative would be, oh, they got beat up by Utah. They have a week off. They're going to come out, hungry. And I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. So
I came away after you texted me that. It's funny because I was watching, and then I watched the ASU USC game just on the little bit of the replay last night, and they didn't look unbeatable. I'll put it to you like that. It didn't look like one of those Pete Carroll teams, that's for sure.
Well, Oregon State should have beat them.
They
threw. I think they threw a couple interceptions late. They had them on the ropes and should have beaten them. But we'll see. I mean, it's a long way away, and I'm proud of what Jed Fish has done.
I am too.
And that staff. I mean, he I mean, to use the old cliche, the cupboard was beyond bare when he got here.
And just think of it this way: how badly would this year's team beat last year's team? That just shows you the improvement.
Great question. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I go with people. And here's the thing: I know the defense is struggling, but offensively, they overhauled that thing in a big way, and it's impressive what he's been able to do in short time. Because again, I've always felt if you can get 5 wins, that is a huge, huge season because you would have inherited a team that lost 20 straight games. You go from 1 win to 5, and maybe you try to get 7 in year 3. But either way, I'm with you. I'm in on the fishbowl for sure.
Now you called the over under, and you already got the over under.
I did get the over under
5 weeks into it.
DraftKings Sportsbook at the footword PHNX there, Matt Muehlebach.
That's impressive.
Right. All right, Matt, as always, buddy, I can't thank you enough for hopping on. Next time we hang out, drinks on me.
Mike, fired up. We got it. Let's go hang out with Kevy and watch a little football, Uncle Kevy.
All right, dude. He would love nothing more than to see you, my man.
All right, man. Take care.
All right. He's Matt Muehlebach. I'm Mike Luke. You've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.